FBI and fit a pattern. That's the thrust of this morning's blockbuster story in the New York Times. Its broad outlines confirmed by Fox News, reporting that FBI officials feel Mr. Obama has, quote, already decided the answers to the very questions they are looking into, and that he prematurely cleared anyone involved of wrongdoing. The Fuhrer led reporters to ask White House Press Secretary Josh Earnest if his boss wasn't trying to, quote, steer the FBI in a particular direction.
Of course not. The president certainly respects the independence and integrity of independent investigations, including those that are conducted by the FBI.
Some FBI officials are said to be drawing parallels with the case of former CIA Director David Petraeus, who pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor earlier this year amid charges he improperly gave classified secrets to his biographer and lover, Paula Broadwell. In 2012, President Obama said he'd seen no evidence that Petraeus' actions had had a negative impact on our national security. Early in his first term, President Obama publicly accused the police in Cambridge, Massachusetts of having, quote, acted stupidly when they arrested Harvard professor Henry Louis Gates. And then in 2012, 1 month before George Zimmerman was indicted in the shooting death of Trayvon Martin, the president remarked that if he had had a son, he would have looked like Martin. Zimmerman was ultimately acquitted in that case. At other times, President Obama has exercised the proper restraint.
From the particular circumstances of Ferguson, which I am careful not to speak to because it's not my job as president to comment on ongoing investigations and specific cases.
As for Mrs. Clinton and her email server, my Fox News colleague Catherine Herridge is reporting tonight that FBI investigators are focused on whether the former Secretary of State was, quote, grossly negligent in her handling of classified data. Megan?
James, thank you. Joining me now, James Kallstrom. He's the former FBI Assistant Director in Charge and a former Senior Counterterrorism Advisor to the New York Governor. Jim, thank you for being back on the program. So you know a lot of the agents involved in this investigation. How angry must they be tonight?
Well, I know some of the agents, Megan. I know some of the supervisors, and I know the senior staff. And they're PO'd, I mean, no question. This is like someone driving a nail, you know, another nail into the coffin of a criminal justice system and what the public thinks about it. You know, that's the real hurtful part. You know, the public sees this and, you know, people shouldn't wonder why the government in general is held in such low esteem.
They're going in there. They're seizing 4 computer servers from the State Department just last week. They're doing their job. They're trying to figure out whether national security was compromised. And yet you've got the commander-in-chief out there declaring this over for all intents and purposes in that 60 Minutes interview.
I mean, it's over the top. I mean, first off, all this will do is make them more committed. Not that they need being more committed, because they're going to do the right thing. I know these guys. I spent 28 years there myself, so I know how it works. And they're going to find the truth, or they're going to say there is no evidence here. They're going to tell the truth about what happens. And we have to be big boys, and we have to stand up and say what that truth is and deal with it, you know, the way our criminal justice system demands. I know Jim Comey very well. He's a great guy. I worked for Governor Pataki when we backgrounded him to be the U.S. Attorney in New York. He's a good friend. He's got a good backbone, and he'll do the right thing. He has a 10-year term, and he doesn't serve necessarily at the pleasure.
But the FBI doesn't get to make the final call. They have to present their findings to the Department of Justice. And might there be fear now that this is all going to be for naught because the fix is in?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't think they'd get away with that if there's a case, you know, and it sure looks to me. I mean, I have not talked to anybody in the FBI on purpose. I haven't asked them any questions. But, I mean, just the news reports, there's prima facie cases of numerous Title 18 statutes, in my view. So, you know, it's just a matter of how they'll compress all these things into either a bill or no bill. But, you know, they're only probably halfway through this investigation, and it's going places. You know, the State Department, most of the communications of the State Department are classified. You know, if some of them are confidential, most of them are probably confidential, but it's all things dealing with how this country deals with foreign governments. You know, that's not something that we want to blow to the wind.
Jim,
so, I mean,
how serious?
What she says is just crazy.
How serious do you think the transgression was by President Obama? You know, he says he doesn't comment on ongoing cases, and yet something as extraordinary as a possible former Secretary of State getting indicted, he chooses to weigh in on.
No, I think it's a big transgression. I mean, I would have, you know, am I surprised? I guess I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed.
Wow. We'll continue to follow
but
this.
I'll tell you, I don't think it'll impact Megan. You know, they're not going to do that. I mean, I was when we were investigating TWA Flight 800, and I had 2 or 3 meetings with Bill Clinton in the White House. You know, next thing I know, people are on the internet saying that, you know, Clinton's told me to find a certain thing. I mean, that was just total nonsense. I mean, that would never happen. I can't imagine that ever happening in the FBI.
These guys are straight shooters. We will find out.
The media, the attacker, disguised as a Palestinian photojournalist wearing a yellow press vest, had reportedly infiltrated a Hamas television crew. Hamas, based in Gaza, has been deemed a terrorist organization by the U.S. The phony journalist stabbed an Israeli soldier in the back and arms before being shot and killed by other IDF soldiers. The Foreign Press Association is now calling on all Palestinian media organizations to verify who gets press credentials. The attack happened near the West Bank, which, along with Jerusalem, has seen a recent rash of attacks, mostly stabbings. And while the UN Security Council met to discuss how to lower the tension, Israel's new UN ambassador talked about how Palestinian leaders have built an incubator for terror, using television and social media to radicalize their young people, even offering biological tutorials. Watch.
This picture you see here is an example of the kind of text that Palestinian children are being exposed to day in and day out, in school, after school. The picture gives children elaborate instructions on how to stab a Jew.
Overnight, a group of Palestinians also set fire to the tomb of Joseph, a site revered by Jews and Christians. Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas condemned that attack, but Israel says Abbas has done nothing to quell the overall violence. Palestinians accuse Israel of trying to divide the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of Islam's holiest sites. Megan.
Trace, thank you. As we mentioned, President Obama spoke to the situation in Israel from the White House earlier today. Listen.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms violence directed against innocent people and believe that Israel has a right to maintain basic law and order and protect its citizens from knife attacks and violence on the streets. We also believe that it's important for both Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israeli elected officials and President Abbas and other people in positions of power to try to tamp down rhetoric that may feed violence.
Charles Krauthammer is a Fox News contributor and author of the book Things That Matter. Charles, good to see you tonight. So what do you make of President Obama's response? You heard it in full, ending with try to tamp down rhetoric, both sides need to, that may feed the violence or anger.
I think the president's statement is shameful, and it follows on shameful statements by his Secretary of State. This is moral equivalence. The idea that somehow the Israeli leadership, that Netanyahu is using inflammatory rhetoric. We all know how and why they started. This was Hamas. This was also Palestinian Authority. They spread the rumor. They spread the libel. They spread the lie that, as we heard, the Israelis are trying to divide the Al-Aqsa Mosque. They're trying to desecrate it. They're trying to destroy it. They're trying to change the status quo. That is not true whatsoever. It's been amplified. It has not been tamped down at all by the Palestinian Authority, which it should be, and they have encouraged the violence. And then there was also a statement by the State Department spokesman, I think it was yesterday, saying that they condemn the excessive force being used, and there are reports of excessive force. What would we do if there were people running around streets of New York stabbing people on buses? We would be using whatever force is necessary to stop them. You've seen some of the video where people are shot while literally holding the knife with the blood visible on the knife. The idea that there is some equivalence here, I think, is disgraceful. Israel is an ally. Israel is a democracy. It has no interest in ginning up any kind of this violence. We know who's doing it. Why can't the president simply say, these are acts of terror, and we condemn them, they're based on a lie, and we call on the Palestinian leadership to say that it is a lie and to stop the violence?
They won't. And
That's not hard to say. He could have done it. He didn't.
You mentioned the State Department spokesman Kirby, who actually came out and said yesterday, individuals on both sides of this have been proven capable of, and in our view, are guilty of acts of terror. So he is clearly drawing the equivalence between both sides, saying they're both engaging in terrorism.
That in and of itself is a libel. Yes, there have been terror attacks by Jews. They are extremely infrequent. When they happen, they are immediately condemned by everyone in the Israeli parliament, from left all the way to right, including the government. The people are pursued and apprehended and arrested. What happens on the Palestinian side? As we saw, they encourage, they teach their children how to stab a Jew. They spread these stories about them to gin up the violence. They make it an instrument of the state. Hamas does openly. Mahmoud Abbas and the other do it in a slightly more sophisticated way. They've been using terror for 30 years. We know that. And for a spokesman for the United States to imply that there is some equivalence in the use of terror, I think is shocking.
Why don't we say what you just said? Why doesn't President Obama make it that clear? And by the way, Ted Cruz is now calling on John Kerry to resign, to step down because of the comments he has made, drawing an equivalence between both sides here.
I'm not going to probe the psyche of the president. I will leave that to psychiatrists. All I can say is his behavior has been the most unfriendly, unsympathetic to Israel of any president since the founding of the state in 1948.
But everybody always points to the massive amounts of money that we give them.
Every time he has an opportunity to demonstrate that, he does.
Everyone points to the massive amounts of money we give to Israel, the support of Iron Dome and so on, to counter that argument.
Well, I mean, that's been the U.S. military, Israeli military, have had a close relationship and support for 60 years. If he were to stop that, that would be that would be a stab in the back of Israel. That would be a way to abandon it to its fate. So I wouldn't expect any president, no matter how unsympathetic, to create a crisis of that sort. And there would be a huge reaction in public opinion, especially among Democrats, of course, and Republicans, if he tried to cut off the aid to Israel. So to say we support Iron Dome, which incidentally is going to help the United States, Israel is the testing field. The Israelis are the ones who test out the new technology. We will use that in our encounters with terrorists, in our encounters with other forces abroad. So it isn't as if it's a gift. It's something that we're going to use. Of course it helps Israel. But that is I mean, on every issue that counts, from the Iranian bomb, where we are going at the U.S. under Obama, has gone against every segment of the Israeli political spectrum. It isn't just the right-wing extreme, as Obama pretends. They're all against this, all the way to the moral equivalence that we heard today.
Charles, thank you.
My pleasure.
Well,